folks are skeptical of AI, and then they hear great feedback from either end users or the internal team members that are like, oh my God, like you converted not just people within my company, but also me a little bit.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling in DevTools. I'm joined today by Nick Gomez, who is the co-founder and CEO of InKeep, which is a AI support tool focused on developer tools. Is that a good?
That's a perfect intro, yeah.
Okay, great. So I know your work. I was looking through like your testimonials, and I think there's 3 of our guests so far are using. So
a lot of
Zooplo, Resend, and Windmill. And that was just from the bubbles. So I'm sure you're working with even more of them.
Yeah. Developer tools, a lot of folks in the space, and they're fun to chat with, and then good customers too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know if you want to tell us a bit about like what you're doing and how you came to like work on support for DevTools.
Yeah, for sure. So we do AI support for developer products. For developer products, support looks a little bit different than traditional B2B SaaS for a few different reasons. One, the developers kind of live in documentation. So even like the touch point is a little bit different, right? So in traditional support, the way in which people interact with support is through like a help center or like an in-app form, that type of thing. Versus for developers, it's often in the documentation, right? And there's other differences. So for example, a lot of support happens in community forums because a lot of developer products are kind of PLG, bottoms up type companies. And so it just takes a lot of different shapes and forms. So we were thinking about like, what does support look like for developer products, right? Like how do you scale a dev tool? Technical support is very time consuming, right? So anytime you're looking, trying to help a developer troubleshoot their issue, you kind of have to account for like what tech stack are they using? You might need logs from them. So it often takes like very technically minded support people or product and engineering time to actually be able to help developers. So we're thinking about like, how do you help people actually scale that up as they grow as a company? And that's really, that's where we started and kind of what we focus on.
Yeah, and actually, I feel like that's actually going to be a good theme for the episode, which is like, how do you actually manage support when things come in from different places? Like on the project I was been working on recently, all of our support requests for like the actual like SaaS would come into like the GitHub repo and people would create issues and stuff like that, which was like completely unexpected for like what I was thinking it would happen.
Right.
And then I guess you also get like people emailing you. Sometimes people would like track you down on like Twitter and stuff, and like all of these things take like quite a long time to resolve. And they're kind of like often like interrelated with like features and things like that. And so we're like, have you seen like if someone's building, a dev tool, like they're probably already doing support, but are there things that they should be doing like to kind of make that process better?
Yeah, I think kind of making it clear when folks should reach to the different channels, right? So delimiting, what should be a GitHub issue versus what should you go to the Discord community to go get answered, right? That type of stuff is very important, just to route people kind of to the right place to ask questions, and also to make it more manageable for yourself, right? So you don't get duplicative questions across separate kind of all these different channels, right? So that can be one thing, but also just that's part of the problem. I think is support tooling is very broken for developer products because it doesn't really account for all these different channels where customer communication, where customer engagements happen. So that's also kind of part of what we try to help companies with.
So trying to like signpost like, okay, this help them put it in the right place, first of all?
A little bit. So right now, what we focus on in terms of helping is helping reach users wherever they're interacting with your company and answer their questions in any of those touch points. So for example, we have a search bar that you can embed into your documentation, but we also have like Slack and Discord bots that you can add to your community. So part of it right now is just like a focus of, hey, wherever your developers are, wherever your users are, you can add a self-serve chat bot that actually helps those users get answers to their questions. So that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is that we ingest all of these different places where knowledge about your product exists, right? So we take your GitHub issues, we take your Discord threads, we take your documentation, and we index all of it. And that becomes part of what the InKeep AI support bot can answer with. So that's part of basically being able to actually tap into all of this different content and all of this different knowledge that exists across all of these different channels. So we help companies with that, right? And so the traditional thing there is like someone's asking something on the docs or looking for something on the docs, but it was answered in Discord. And Google can't get that. It's buried. Discord search is not that great.
Yeah.
So someone might not even want to join a Discord, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that knowledge exists, but the developer can't find it. And so they might end up creating a support ticket and adding noise to your team. So what we help companies do is kind of unify all of these different places where knowledge exists into one experience so that developers can just get answers to what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I saw that you also do this, like the hallucinations is like a big part of the thing that you talk about on the website.
Yeah, for sure. So with AI, it's a little bit hypey, and there's a lot of folks who are very hesitant about how to, if and how to incorporate AI into their, especially customer-facing scenarios, right? The primary reason there is like if the bot or the AI assistant like hallucinates or makes something up or says something that is misleading, that might actually create more confusion for like an end user. And I think in this space, it's very easy to create like a 60-70% solution that can like pseudo answer things about your product or your documentation. And so I think companies either kind of try to quickly spin up something themselves, or they got bombarded with a bunch of requests from startups who were trying to create something like a solution in this space because there is so much opportunity. But a lot of the solutions fall short because the quality wasn't quite there. So we've met with a ton of teams who have explored many solutions and just could not come to a level of confidence with any of them because of that exact issue. And so that tends to be one place where we differentiate. We spend a lot of time making sure that the quality is as good as possible, like constantly experimenting with the latest approaches and methods and models, having really robust evaluation frameworks so that we can constantly test that we're not any changes that we make don't create any hallucinations. And also, honestly, part of it is all of our customers have a really high bar for quality. So as soon as they complain about anything, we go and fix it, and that generalizes and helps everyone. So by working with a lot of companies that really care about end user experience, we've just continued to kind of raise our own bar over time. And at this point, companies with really high bars, like Pinecone, Anthropic, Postman, they all really care about end user experience and quality, and they've all come to trust us because we care so much about quality.
That's cool. And what % of like questions end up like getting resolved like without like the human being involved?
It depends on the like the actual knowledge that exists about your product, right? So we have like we give people in our dashboard a percentage of questions that were answerable from the documentation. So teams can actually track this and use that as a KPI, if you will.
Help improve the docs.
Exactly. Yeah, cool. So on the upper side, it's usually like we've seen up to 90% coverage. That's for typically more mature companies that have a lot of GitHub issues, Discord, content. But even earlier stage, it can be anywhere between like 30 and 40% as well. It's I mean, you can imagine a good portion of that might have ended up in your support teams or in your engineering team's hands if it hadn't been caught by AI. So it's like a huge time saver, but it also makes the iteration loop and the experience for developers so much better because they can get those answers as soon as they have them.
They don't have to wait for a ticket to be.
They don't have to reach out to a human. They might be worried about being sold to. They're just like, I have a scenario. I want to get it implemented. How can I do that with your product? And if so, how? That's what a developer wants to know when they're trying to evaluate a new product. And being able to kind of close that loop and give them direct answers is kind of like the best experience.
Yeah. And do you find like, I would imagine one of my hesitations would be that as a developer, I am often very like skeptical as soon as I see, oh no, it's like an AI chatbot. Like it's going to be so bad. Do you think that developers are actually like trusting enough to like be like, let me try the chatbot?
Right. So we also hear this a fair bit where, especially founders or engineering leaders, they they're a little bit hesitant because they're like, okay, I come from a background where I read all the documentation. I try to really understand the product. And a lot of folks still operate that way. But what we found is with tools like Cursor or VS Code and GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT, developers, they're actually probably one of the primary users of all these AI tools.
Yeah.
And I think they're becoming an expectation that they can move very quickly in development, right?
Yeah.
So that's been one of the huge increases in productivity for folks, is for developers to be able to just use these tools to generate code, modify code, and create new features, et cetera, very quickly. That's all through these conversational LLM experiences. And so it kind of makes total sense for developers if in their IDE, when they're building, they get this experience. When they're trying a new product or trying to learn about a product, they would want that too.
Yeah.
And so while there are definitely people who are still very hesitant about like interacting with an AI chatbot, and that's in part because a lot of them are not that great, what we find is like when someone asks a question, it generates a good answer, they trust it, and they're like, oh, why would I ever read the docs again?
Yeah.
So we've actually heard from founders, I've heard this story a few times actually, where like they were skeptical about AI themselves, and so they hadn't really considered any AI solution. But then one of their users was like, "Hey, you don't have a AI chatbot. This competitor does. Could you get one? I don't want to read through all your docs. Or I've had a really good experience trying other things that have this. So it's almost becoming like an expectation that you have a solution because developers are kind of getting used to that.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be almost like as like you both like as you get more context and the chatbot gets better, and then like Cursor is probably going to get like more, like they might start like trying to get like the Discord chats and stuff of like of these dev tools, like you might want to like, do you think there's ever going to be like a kind of like almost like like people start because like what you're describing is like actually seems like valuable beyond support, but also just like how I develop, for sure. Like Cursor, but with more context about the dev tools.
Right. So Cursor actually does have like a way to index arbitrary websites. It's like a good quick pass, but there's like a few key kind of differentiators there. One, how they do it is they very quickly do it, right? So they're not like artificially using like a headless browser type of thing, crawling the website. So they're just doing whatever they can get as quickly as possible, and that's how they index it. And then the other part is, for that, they don't always get all the content because of that. And so it's meant to be more like a quick, first pass type of thing. So that there's a little bit of a mixed experience there. And then two, from a company standpoint, they can actually, with InKeep or a tool like us, they control the experience and they can add knowledge to it that you wouldn't otherwise get through like the public internet. So an example there is Discord, right? So Discord is not in the public wide web. So things like Cursor can't index that. But also teams oftentimes use historical support tickets or other content and knowledge that they have that is private to help power the chatbot and the knowledge. So typically an AI copilot specifically maintained by your team and overseen by your team, and that uses some of these private sources will be better than something that can only scrape like the public web.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what does like a good, like, I guess you've worked with a lot of support teams now, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen any patterns for like what like good support teams look like at DevTools?
I think the best ones are really good at closing the loop, right? And it's so oftentimes it's, I either because the support folks are product oriented, like people who really care about product and they think of support and self-service experience as part of the product, or they're product people who are actually leading, like, basically the lines blur very heavily when it's like operated well. And so part of it is like, hey, if we're answering stuff on Discord and support tickets, is that getting reflected back into the documentation or help center or wherever that content lives? Are we listening to the common things that people are asking for, and are we not just answering that stuff in the documentation, but like, are we incorporating that into our roadmap, right? Like, are we prioritizing correctly based on what people are asking? So that's part of what we actually help companies do, is we take all of the conversations people are having with the AI, and we provide them analytics on the specific things that where there wasn't a good answer based on your existing documentation, or where the bot said that something wasn't supported. So those analytics, and it doesn't just like flag the questions, we actually summarize for you using AI exactly the thing that someone was looking for that was not answerable. So we make these like weekly and monthly reports that documentation or product teams can use to actually prioritize their content roadmap or their product roadmap as well. So I think teams that the best teams that I've seen are really good about closely monitoring all of that and actually taking action such that the knowledge base gets better, the product gets better, and you get less support questions, right? As those two things happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think you're saying that it's not just about answering the question, it's about like using the information that the question gives you to improve the documentation so that question doesn't get asked again or gets asked less often, or people just don't have that issue anymore because of changes to the product.
Exactly.
Okay, that's very cool. And in terms of like actual like who does the job, you mentioned like product teams. So in that case, it is like actual sort of like core engineers who are like answering support, or do the good teams typically have like, I've seen people with like titles like level 2 support or like level 3 support and that sort of thing.
It varies a lot by team, and there's not really like necessarily a prescription for how you should do it. So sometimes it's DevRel folks who are kind of like the first line of defense for especially like community questions. So they'll be the ones like answering stuff on the Discord or on a forum, that type of thing. Sometimes the support team is the one that's staffing the community channels, that type of stuff. We do see it often, actually. It's like a support team does only your paid customers or like the proper like ticketed through like a support form. And then the community will be like DevRel or product folks, stuff like that. So some folks split it that way. Some folks support team owns all of it, et cetera. It's really kind of like, it depends on what your business model is, and just how your team is split up. But at the end of the day, I think what matters is just whatever the title is or whatever org that they fall under. The thing that matters most is like, one, really caring about like answering as quickly as possible. And then two, just having knowledgeable people about the product at any of those layers. And if you have those two things, then like
it's hard to go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is kind of like a slightly off question, but like, do you see many companies that are like charging specifically for support?
Yeah, it tends to be a pretty big differentiator for open source companies or very PLG kind of bottoms up type companies, where they're at, how they part of the upsell or to a paid tier or an enterprise tier is dedicated support. So some of those interactions happen over Slack, where for an enterprise customer, you might create like a one-on-one Slack channel for folks. I've seen cases where you actually can't create a proper support ticket unless you're a paid customer, because those have like SLAs and other kind of contractual things attached to them. And so that if you want support, then you can only go to the Discord, right? So yeah, like access to higher levels of support tends to be one of the things that companies try to differentiate their paid plans or enterprise plans with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, sorry, these are like so many like noob questions on support because like it's not something I know much about at all.
Yeah.
But like when you also get like, you know, if you're in one time zone, if most of your team's in like a certain time zone, like have you seen like good solutions for people in terms of like making sure that actually things get answered outside of your time zones?
Yeah, I mean that's challenging and hard, right? Like if you're an in-person team in SF, it's going to be hard to answer like European customers or folks in like Israel and just other parts because of the time difference is so big. I mean, honestly, part of the answer there is if you have an AI support bot, users don't need to interact with a human to be able to get 24/7 help. Like one of our customers. Windmill, the founder, literally.
Ruben's been on the show.
When he literally kind of gave us a feedback of like, it feels like we have like an extra team member that's online 24/7 and helping our users. So that can be, you know, one way in which you can make sure that regardless of the time zone you're in, you're able to get some level of support regardless of, you know, whether your team's awake or not. But yeah, if you're a distributed team, it might be a little bit easier just because you can literally, you know, have folks that align better with the different time zones and stuff like that. Yeah.
But I guess otherwise, like if someone does want to like have, you know, obviously they're going to use, they should use something like InKeep, but then they probably also need like someone that for like the escalations and stuff where like there isn't a solution available. Is it like have like rotas like in like where people work late, or is it like, you know, hire someone in another time zone that you see is like?
Technical support is somewhat difficult to like offshore.
Yeah.
Right. Because it requires a very high level of knowledge of the product and engineering and software and that type of thing. So most of the time when I would recommend people hire, like if they do hire internationally, it's like a full-time person that's part of your proper team, is very intimately familiar with your product, is like a core part of your support. So I wouldn't look to kind of offload it to some type of external service or like a contractor type thing. I would just look to hire someone really good. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a support person. If you just have like an engineer working in a different area, they can help field some of these support questions. And we see that a lot, especially in early stage companies. It's really a group effort where founders actually want all of their team to be answering questions because it builds empathy within the team and about what people are asking for, what they're running into, and it just adds like a layer of responsibility as well. So it doesn't have to be a support person. You can hire an engineer, product person, and someone who's knowledgeable about the product and can help field some of these questions when the kind of the rest of the team is offline.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And have there been any kind of like surprising things that you've like learned about support and like good support?
Surprising things. You know, one really interesting pattern that I kind of realized is the answer to, so community building is like a very important thing for a lot of companies, right? Like building a Discord or a Slack, creating champions and that type of thing. What I kind of realized is that part of the reason why I think this that approach materialized of like having a Discord community was to help bring on other folks who are knowledgeable about your product to answer questions. It's almost like crowdsourcing support. Maybe most folks wouldn't frame it that way, but it is a way to get, it doesn't require you hiring someone. It just requires you creating a community where people feel so passionate about the product that they're willing to help others, right? And developers tend to be that persona where if they use a tool a lot, they become passionate about it, want to be part of a community, want to help others, right? Like I think everyone kind of grew up using like Stack Overflow and that type of thing. And I think there's like a built-in sense of like, I've gotten help from other people, so I'm gonna help other people as well. And so community building is like a form of support as well. where the more champions you create for your product, the more folks who are knowledgeable and that can actually help offload a little bit of support to the general community and others. So that's been I think that's an interesting pattern where you don't really see that with other types of products. I think that's pretty unique to developer products, and in part because of the nature of developers and kind of their willingness to help others.
Yeah, developers are super social and very great.
Exactly.
One of the things, I don't know if this is like an actual topic that you're happy talking about, but something that you told me is that like some of your customers have been investing in you. Is that a topic we can talk about?
Sure. I mean, the TLDR there is like sometimes folks are skeptical of AI, and then their product team or support team or whoever we end up working with like ends up adding it. And then they hear great feedback from either end users or the internal team members that are like, oh my God, like we tried so many AI solutions, none of them were great, but like this really made a difference. We've had a few of those cases where then the founder is like, oh, actually, I was so impressed by this whole thing that you converted not just people within my company, but also me a little bit about like the value of this. Would you be open to like an angel check and stuff like that? So we've taken on a few of those for folks we find that are like good to have on our team.
Yeah, that's very cool. Like, are there any like, I guess there's like benefits to that, or it's just like a big kind of confidence?
I think it's good to have folks who really care and are invested in you, and if that makes sense. So like as we develop new things in the future, it's very easy to kind of pick their brain about like how would you find this valuable? What messaging would work? That type of thing. So they're just good advisors, honestly. So oftentimes that's why we do this, is if we feel that it's someone who really cares about the space, we have a good repertoire with, and we feel could have interesting product insights as we build new things.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I feel like
I wouldn't rely on it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great story though. It's like like customers. They tried it. Oh, you know this person? Yeah, they tried it, and then they thought it was so good they wanted to invest their own money. It's like, it's not just, I don't know, it feels meaningful. And then also when I was talking to Sean Wang recently, probably this episode will be out by then.
Yeah.
He was talking about like hiring your customers and saying that like really good DevRel opportunity is to actually just hire like developers that bought and brought your tool into their company, because they like believe in it so much they put their neck on the line there,
right?
And they were able to like actually sell it internally.
Right. Yep.
And so it's kind of interesting area, like your customers at the early stages could be like actually a lot more than your customers.
Yeah, that's part of when I was talking about community building.
Yeah.
I've seen that pattern a ton as well, where someone who's super active in the community, answering questions, that type of stuff, and it seems like they're extremely knowledgeable of the product and are very active. I've seen a ton of companies end up actually kind of reaching out to those folks and be like, hey, actually, either it can be for engineering roles or support or DevRel, depending on who the person is. But that does happen quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know. DevTools has that kind of quality where like people are really invested, and there's a little bit of like fandom or not fandom, just like appreciation for good quality craft.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it goes both ways, right? So like developers appreciate really well built products.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. I think companies, teams appreciate community members or customers who appreciate that craft and like build on top of it or champion it to other folks, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. It's like a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the best things. Anurag from Render was kind of talking about Intercom on the last episode for support, and I thought I'd throw you a hard question of like, how do you guys compare to
Intercom?
Intercom.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. a decent amount, especially actually from like investors or folks not in the developer space. But the short there is like Intercom is quite good at what it does, but what it does is doesn't apply that well to developer products. So what I mean by that is, for example, an Intercom chat bubble is never going to generate like a code snippet for you. That's just not what it's like designed for. That's not who the end user is designed for. So like Intercom, probably like half of their customers are B2C or like consumer facing scenarios, right? So it's not all B2B SaaS. Probably a fairly small portion of it is actually developer products, that type of thing. Yeah. So it's not just like, it's not a primary use case for that product, right? So actually one of the inspiration points for us when we were starting was I noticed that for B2B SaaS, like traditional B2B SaaS products, something like probably like 90% of them use some type of chat bubble. So like either Intercom or Drift or any of those. But when I was looking at developer products, at some point it hit me. I'm like, I'm not seeing that little chat bubble, right? I would see it maybe in 1 in 5, so like 20% instead of like 90%. So there is like some core value prop that Intercom or these chat bubbles provide, and what I asked myself is like, what value are they providing to these types of companies, and why doesn't that apply to developer products, and what is the equivalent in developer products, right? So that was actually part of the inspiration for how we get started. Is like, what is that gap there? Why is there that disconnect? So yeah, in terms of how we compare to, for example, Intercom, so geared specifically for technical developer products, you can embed us in a few different, like as React components instead of like iframe thing. You can add us like as a search bar, as a Discord bot, Slack bot. So part of it is just like the end user touch points are different. And we accommodate kind of for wherever you're meeting your users or wherever your users interact with you, that type of thing. And yeah, just the overall end user experience is oriented around developers and what they would enjoy. Part of it too is if you poll developers, I would say a majority of them would tell you that they actually are like allergic to those little chat bubbles. I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, but a lot of people, developers in particular, associated with like marketing and sales because it's often used for that by kind of traditional businesses, like lead generation, that type of stuff. And so developers don't want to be sold to. They don't want that experience. And also some of them feel like it's partly inauthentic in that they associate those chat bubbles with like, I need to click a bunch of buttons to actually talk to a human. And that because the AI or the automations there are not very good and are not actually going to answer my questions, right? And so I think developers actually don't use it that much, right? And aren't keen to use it that much. So for us, like everything from our actual AI and ML pipelines and how we ingest content to the actual end user experience, like the UIs, are oriented around kind of avoiding those issues that developers have with traditional chat bubbles.
Yeah. Okay, that's very cool. That makes sense. Like devs are skeptical of these things, I think. And okay, one last question I want to ask you is like, what developer tools are you guys using that you like?
I mean, it's my favorite pastime, right? Let's see, we use Drizzle for like a RRM. Nice. We use Vercel to deploy a lot of our stuff. GCP for like Docker based images. I mean, all the...
Okay, cool. Any new ones that you've like, any kind of like startups that you're excited about?
Oh man, we started using Resend, probably not that nice. Shocking. Shout out to Zeno. They have a really sleek UI, support everything. I think they're pretty representative of like what is good modern developer experience and support across kind of like the entire life cycle. So Resend. Let's see what else other new things that we're trying. Recently started using LangFuse for like a bit of observability, like LM observability stuff. They're like a YC company.
So that's like when you want to see like what kind of was the prompt and what was the response?
Exactly. It's like monitoring LLM applications and that type of stuff. Yeah. One thing, it's not really a startup, but the Vercel AI SDK, it's basically, it's a way to call and AI, like models, like OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, and easily kind of turn that into generative UI is what they're calling it.
Cool. So like the V0 stuff, but on an API.
Yeah, basically like being able to easily turn a LLM call into like dynamic UI components.
Oh, that's cool.
So for example, we use that in our reporting layer where in real time, you can come into our reports, say, I want to see the documentation gaps for the last month, right? You click a button, we do our AI stuff, and then in real time, we're using the Vercel SDK. We can generate like those insights for you, the things that like summarize for you, like here's XYZ, and we render that kind of in real time.
Oh, wow.
And stream it to the UI.
It generates the UI based on the response based on the data you get back.
Yeah, basically as we process it and as we say, okay, here's one topic area that you could be better at, and here's the specific things that people couldn't find. That gets streamed to the UI. You see that, you can start reading it, and then it's continuing to do that for the rest of the topic areas.
Wow, that's cool.
And it gets streamed in real time, so there's not like an async process there. But there's a ton of things that people do with it. So for another common example, there's like, I have a form, right? But I want to provide an ad, like I don't want to have someone actually go through the entire form. I want to just give someone a text area. They can describe what they want. Or what they're looking for. This is common for like support tickets, right? You can actually take that information, call an AI model, and map what they put in the text area into the forms, into the input fields.
So that you're getting the kind of benefits of like filtering and stuff like that, but they're getting the benefits of like just
exactly. It's basically like turning unstructured natural language into structured objects of some sort. And then the Vercel SDK makes it easy to take those structured objects and then stream them as UI components to an application.
That's cool. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Application development, I think, is going to change a lot, and what UIs look like, and what apps and dashboards look like, because there's I think an untapped or still maturing side of using AI and these models. Is around how do you make all of these end user experiences richer and more intuitive and dynamic. So front end development, I think, is changing a little bit because front end developers now can use these it's democratized. They can use these AI models to actually create really rich experiences. So another example there is like date pickers. Instead of having to like click through and stuff like that, I can just say like 1 week from now, and then the LLM will be able to convert that into like a proper date object. So there's just like a bunch of little micro places where you can really improve the experience, and then there's use cases like the real time generative reporting layer that we have, stuff like that. But yeah,
super cool. For some reason, I feel like date picking. I remember doing. It's always like more complex than like
NP hard problem.
Things never work properly. Like it's just there's always like some weird bug on like
exactly.
That's really cool. Okay, amazing. Well, thanks so much, Nick.
Absolutely.
And where can people learn more about you and about InKeep?
At inkeep.com. You can. Nice. You can come in there. Actually, one thing that we do is if you have a product, it doesn't even have to be a developer product. We have a fair amount of non-DevTools as customers now. You can come in, drop in a URL to like your documentation or your help center, whatever it is, and we'll automatically generate a demo for you to try. You don't even have to. Cool. You don't have to meet with me. You don't have to start pay.
You're
for
a nice guy if they do want to meet you.
Hopefully, I'm fun to talk to. But so if people want to check it out for their own documentation or for their own product, they can come in and very easily do that through our website.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Nick, for joining.
Appreciate it.